Hi folks, welcome back. I'm KAYAOＤLU. What to make of the fall of Yevgeny Prigozhin? On August 23rd, the leader of the Wagner Group, the infamous private military contractor that takes care of Russia's international dirty laundries, died in a plane crash northwest of Moscow. I'm not going to go into the whodunit in this video or go down the rabbit hole of whether it was really Prigozhin on the plane, etc. I think the answers are clear, though commentators, whom I respect immensely, entertain different scenarios, and that's fine. What I want to focus here is what will happen next in Russia, especially to President Vladimir Putin's regime, and how it will affect the war in Ukraine. Before we start, please click the like and subscribe buttons below, and write your thoughts and questions in the comments section. Also share this video with your friends. A lot of the excitement for me in making these videos comes from interacting with you, the audience. Oh, and the funnier and snidder your comments, the better. I love those. You will recall that Prigozhin and his Wagner Group staged a mutiny in late June. They captured the city Rostov-on-Don in southern Russia, along with the regional headquarters of the Russian military in that city. The Wagnerites then marched on Moscow to throw out the defense minister Sergei Shoigu and Chief of General Staff General Valery Gerasimov, and probably even overthrow Putin. In less than 48 hours, however, Prigozhin agreed to an amnesty deal with Putin that was brokered by Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko. The deal stipulated that the mutineers would not be prosecuted, and Wagner units fighting in Ukraine and stationed in Russia proper would be brought under service contracts with the Russian Defense Ministry. The deal also guaranteed safe passage to Prigozhin and his inner circle to Belarus, and for the company to move its base of operations there. Meanwhile, Wagner's overseas units, especially in Africa and Syria, would continue to operate under Prigozhin. So everybody got something out of the amnesty deal and kept their dignity, or so it seemed. Just a few days before his fatal accident, Prigozhin had posted a video from an undisclosed location in Africa to showcase how he and Wagner were still in the field doing Mother Russia's work. So what happens now that Prigozhin is no more? The Wagner Group will probably be placed under new management and have its branding changed. I just hope that they don't use the names of my favorite Russian composers, Tchaikovsky and Shostakovich. There is of course, a high likelihood that the organization's overseas operations will continue in line with Russian interests. As for Russia more broadly, Winston Churchill once famously said that Russia is a riddle, wrapped in a mystery, inside an enigma. Churchill also said Russia is never as weak as it looks, nor is it ever as strong as it seems. So let's look at the weaknesses at the moment. In late June, I argued how the Wagner mutiny laid bare the inherent weaknesses of Putin and his regime, and Russia's problems in the Ukraine war. I recall saying something to the effect of how Putin, a former KGB spy, is no Russian James Bond or Jack Ryan, or some sort of a Carla from the John le Carré universe, always having an ace up his sleeves, or staying several steps ahead of his enemies. Putin is aging, he's getting weaker and less competent, and is surrounded by even less competent and highly corrupt people. Or at least people who are pretending to be corrupt and incompetent. For 20 years, in the run-up to the war in Ukraine, the Putin system transferred hundreds of billions of dollars of the Russian people's money into oligarch pockets. In return, the oligarchs had to stick with Putin through thick and thin. Prigozhin, of course, ignored that deal and he fell from favor. With respect to other characters in the Russian system, Prigozhin's demise might give a moment of pause to them, the oligarchs, kleptocrats, securitycrats, and all sorts of rats, but they will soon get back to angling for power and influence, undermining each other and making sure that they don't get into Putin's crosshairs along the way. Which means Putin will maintain his strength a little longer. This Prigozhin business sends a strong message. However, no amount of money thrown at the problems of the Russian system and no number of Putinistas falling out of windows or airplanes will fix the basic problems of Russia. Too many high and mighty persons are pilfering public coffers for the state to obtain results where it matters. For example, in the battlefield. So speaking of battles and war and strength, what about the fighting in Ukraine? While the Ukrainian counteroffensive continues, it hasn't achieved the sort of spectacular results that some geniuses in Washington and European capitals said it would accomplish. The Russians built heavily fortified defensive positions since last winter, which means that the front lines are now more stable. A trench warfare, it turns out, is something that the Russians manage better than maneuver warfare. Of course, maybe the introduction of F-16 fighter jets from NATO countries into the Ukrainian arsenal will change that picture, but I don't know. It's how the continuation or conclusion of the war might affect Putin that I'm curious about. If he can end the war on terms that are even remotely favorable to himself, Putin can come out of this with renewed strength. Maybe. But still, I can't help but see a poetic irony in all of this for the Russian president. When he came to power in 2000, he promised to do away with the chaos and corruption of the 1990s under Boris Yeltsin. Putin also promised to crush the separatist movement in Chechnya, and he delivered on those promises. Though, as the financier and political activist Bill Browder points out, Putin's success owed largely to his ability to turn the decentralized and out-of-control corruption of the Yeltsin years into something more centralized and systematic. Now, with the war in Ukraine continuing, the Russian economy is showing signs of trouble with inflation and the ruble's loss of value. Putin's term in power, therefore, may have come full circle. As I quoted Churchill earlier, Russia is never as weak nor as strong as we think, but it sure looks scarier and more uncertain than it was in the 1990s. In this context, Putin may physically survive and perhaps live to old age, but his legacy is probably tarnished forever. And still, he can do something really, really scary. I don't see how, after all this, he ends his rule on a positive note. So that's my take. What do you think? Will Prigozhin's death change the course of the Putin regime and the war in Ukraine? Will Putin live long and prosper, as they say on my planet? Why not? Write in the comments below. Thanks a lot, folks. I'll see you soon.